Right, welcome to my video. This video is designed to help you with bicycle maintenance, and it's the first, I hope, of a series of videos that I'm going to post today that people might be able to use. It's aimed at people like me. I use my bike as a commuter and I do quite a lot of miles on the bike, so it does get pretty knackered and needs fixing. But these videos also will hopefully help people that just are occasional weekend riders, or just people that want to fix up their kids' bikes. If you are riding a rock-hard road bike, you'll probably want to get it serviced and maintained at a proper bike shop. Because if you're spending £6,000 or £7,000 or £10,000 on a bike, you need to be very careful with the components, and also carbon fibre components are so easy to break. This bike is aluminium. I've got some carbon fibre forks, but most of the bike is aluminium. Once you start drilling into or breaking carbon fibre components, you've just ruined your whole bike. So this is aimed at commuters and occasional riders. In this series of videos, and in the notes beneath this YouTube video, I will hope to put a link to each of the subsequent videos. I'll talk about jobs which will range from the front of the bike to the back of the bike. We'll talk about bearings, how to service them and keep them running, including how to get grit out of them because they can get noisy. Bearings last for absolutely ages if you maintain them properly. This particular bike has done now, how long? This bike's probably done 20,000 miles now, which doesn't sound like a lot when you think about a car that's done 20,000 miles, but a bike takes a lot more punishment because my weight, I'm about 80 kilos, and I'm belting down the road in this thing. It takes a lot of jarring. And also my regular journey goes through a ford, so I go through about a foot of water, so these poor bearings are immersed in water. And yet these are the original bearings in here. They've even got the original ball bearings in them. But I keep them nice, and so you can see it still rotates nicely. The bike today is in quite a lot of need of service because you'll see the brakes, they do that horrible thing that bikes do, they shriek. This bike has got disc brakes, but if your bike has rim brakes, they'll also shriek, and I'm going to do a video in a minute that shows how to stop them shrieking. We'll be servicing the bearings, we'll pull them out. We'll also have a video talking about things that you can buy to put on the bike, like mud guards like this, and why they're important. I have these on, not so much to keep me dry, but more to protect the chain gear. Also things like, this is a hybrid Pinnacle, which is Evan's own brand, and it has drop handlebars, but I've fitted on these what's called aero bars that I bought online, which are lovely. And if you're going on a windy day through a wind, it's really nice to hunker down and not have to pedal against that wind. So moving back here, we're going to talk about the bottom bracket, which is the main bearing that these pedals rotate on. This is a Shimano Holotech bottom bracket, but when I do the video that explains how to change that, I'll also explain how other types of bottom brackets will work. We'll show how to remove the chain wheel, which is this bike has two wheels at the front here, two cogs at the front. These are called the chain wheels, or chain rings rather. I'm going to show how to remove these, how to maintain them. These ones are in a pretty shocking condition. How you know when they're worn and how you stop them wearing. There'll be a whole video on chains themselves. Chains are a consumable part, and you need to not only service them and make sure they run nicely, but you also need to replace them regularly, because if you don't replace the chain, you ruin everything else in a really short space of time. I'm going to talk then in another video about the cassette, which is the pile of cogs at the back here. How to clean it, how to keep it nice, how to remove it, and common things that will go wrong with it. Underneath that is a free hub. It's a bearing that allows the wheels to turn, like the wheel to free wheel, and the cog to stay still, but when you pedal, it pedals it along. I'll then talk about the derailleur, how to keep that nice so that when you change gear with the handlebars, it straight away changes gear here without clicking or rattling, and you don't waste power pedaling, just driving the grease around. I'll talk about the jockey wheels here, why they're important, and what you can do to maintain and service those. How you can align the derailleur gear, what these little screws here do. The rear brake is the same as the front brake. Again, we'll show how to maintain that, and a few nice little tricks as well, how you can preserve the life of the pads. one of the ways that a lovely way to stop shrieking. The brakes shriek because they get grease on them. Now, no matter how carefully you ride, you will always pick up grease. Every time you oil the chain, there's going to risk that some grease will get onto the discs or onto the rims if you have rim brakes. A brilliant way of getting grease off here, which I'll show in a later video, is to use a blowtorch. You can buy. I bought a blowtorch for £7 at a hardware store, and it just melts the grease off. It's a lovely thing to do. Lastly, we'll talk about saddle height, saddle position, and pedals, different types of pedals that are available. Many people that cycle regularly will use clips, cleats. These particular pedals are my favourite. They're half you can ride with an ordinary shoe, and then the bottom half you can ride with a clip pedal, and they're quite nicely weighted so that when you let go of them, can you just see that? They turn round. So we'll talk about things like that. This video is just an introduction, but in a minute I'm going to turn the camera around to my workbench and show you the tools that you need. If you decide you want to do tools, to do your own bike maintenance, it's worth thinking about, well, why are you doing that rather than going to a bike shop? Bike shops to give a great service, and I hate to advise anyone not to use a bike shop because they're brilliant. I find that they don't fit in with my commuting life, because if I have a problem on the bike, I need to fix it really that night so I can ride the next day. I do have a spare bike I can ride. It's not as nice as, or I don't like it as much as this one. But I do have another bike, but I'd rather be able to come home, fix whatever's wrong, and then the next day I can crack on. Similarly, if you've got the kids' bikes and they say, oh, Dad, this bike needs fixing, you can book it into the shop and then take it to the shop and then leave it for a week and then come and collect it when the work's done. That's, for many cases, that's going to be fine. If you've got a holiday coming up or a trip coming up, you can plan ahead. But a lot of the time, the children will say, oh, well, I'm going to go on this particular trip and I'm going in a minute, or I'm going tomorrow. If you've got the tools, you can just do that straight away. So it's not expensive. If I could go back in time and have my time again, rather than building up this group of tools, I'd have gone out and bought the whole lot in one go. It would have been cheaper, and it would have been nicer, because I can then straight away do every job rather than getting to the job thinking, oh golly, I need that extra particular thing. Halfway through the job realising I can't do it, going out to a hardware store to try and buy that tool. So in a minute I'm going to turn the camera around and you can see the tools that I use. Hopefully, I'm not an expert at this camera thing, hopefully I'm just going to pick the camera up and we'll do this as a continuous shot. If it is a rubbishy way of focusing it, I might need to do it as a separate video. I'll paste it together. Oh, we'll see, we'll see. Bear with me. Now, can the camera see that okay? In a minute, actually, once I start describing each of the tools, I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see just that. The thing I want to show you is I've arranged an area. This is just an old kitchen workbench actually in the garage, but I've arranged an area that's clear that I can have my tools out and do whatever job it is without. You can see from the background of this film, this is our garage and it is filled with clutter, just junk. We don't use the loft in the house, but everything's just out here. Yes, it probably does need to go to the tip, but it's in the way. Most people's garages that I know are a bit like that. So have an area that's completely clear so that your bike project doesn't get ruined with things falling on it. So the tools. The first tool that I will say you need, I can turn this camera around, is the bike stand itself. Don't skimp out and fail to buy a bike stand. As I said, this was £28, I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, and I must have used it hundreds of times. When you pick it up, the legs at the bottom just fold away, so this takes up no more room than a broom in the cupboard. I turn the camera round, hopefully, oh, it's not a good idea having the backlit there. If I turn that round like that, so it just looks at the workbench, and I'll try and not stand in the field of view of the camera. I can't actually see which way it's going. Pull that around so I can see where I stand. Right, these are just a few of the components. This is an old chainring. When I do the chainring video, I'm going to show you this one. next to the new one I put on last week, and you can see the amount of wear on these things is shocking. So I'm going to show you on a later video how you know when one of these is worn. Well, you will know because your gears keep slipping, but actually you'll know before then, so I'll show you that. This is a worn out chain, and I'm going to show you how you know that it's worn out. There's a very important tool which is here, which I should have laid out. That's probably the cheapest and the most important tool. Find a place for that. Put it there. So, I'm getting off topic now. Let's talk about the tools in the order of priority. First thing you need is a bike stand, as I mentioned earlier. Definitely get one of those. The next thing you should do is to cover most of the tools, and this is what I wished I'd done at the start, rather than just getting the odd bits here and there. This is a bike tool box. This one's called Timber Tech. This was £26, and it comes with a load of things that you don't need. I mean, really? But it also comes with a load of tools that you do need, and if I go through them in turn, these and this, these are called cone spanners, and if you look at them, they've got lots of different sizes inside them, so all your different bike wheel bearings will have different cone bearings in them, or cone bolt covers in them. This enables you to fix those, or to take them out, either replace them or re-grease them and put them back in again. Normally I find you don't need to replace these things. The bearings on a bike you can just re-grease and put back. This is for taking off your steering head, as is this extremely useful and enormously big spanner. This is called a chain whip, and you use this to remove, this is an old and worn out cassette, the stack of cogs. That's, the camera can see that. The lighting is terrible, I apologise. When I do the video that actually shows this, I'll make sure it's not got a window right behind. Okay, that's a chain whip, and that enables you, using that and an ordinary socket wrench, you can remove the cassette. This also fits in there. This cost 90p on Amazon. Lots of the tools I've bought are on Amazon. It's absolutely marvellous. It's a telescopic thing for a reason that I don't understand, because you never need it to be telescopic. But when you undo the bearings on the bike, they will invariably, if the grease is all gone away, they'll invariably fall into a gap, you can't reach them. There's a little magnet on the end of that, and it will just pick those bearings up. Lovely little tool. This is a chain link removal tool, and we'll show you how you can use this to both remove one of these links and then reattach it. It's a lovely design, and this is probably my favourite piece of equipment in that toolbox. It's a socket spanner, so if you have a socket set like this, it's amazing they supply this set without the right socket spanner, but you put that in there and this fits, and there's a different one. This is for Campaglio, I never know how you pronounce it. This is for a slightly different brand, which I've never used that one on mine, but this is the one for Shimano, and most people watching this video, most bikes in the UK tend to have Shimano parts on them. This fits in there, and then you hold the, with the chain whip you hold it still, and then you just push it and it comes out. That's another lovely tool. And then, whoops, and then this is what's called a spoke spanner. If you ride a mountain bike and you crash into a tree, as my children have done, you'll find the wheel pretty soon gets buckled, and it's quite hard to unbuckle it. If you've got rim brakes, it's a real problem, because your brakes keep on rubbing and slowing that person down. You can straighten the wheel just by bending it back into shape, but then you can do the final straightening by tightening up the spokes, and I'll show you how to do this in a later video. Tightening up the spokes either side of the brake, and they'll make the wheel nice and true again. So this box here, it's got some other bits in it. This box here, as I say, very inexpensive to buy. The next thing, and I'd actually go so far as to say, as do not do any bike maintenance at all, well, no matter how inexpensive your bike, without having a torque wrench. A torque wrench is something that is designed to stop you over tightening or under tightening bolts. And it has a setting on here so that when you reach the desired amount of tightness, you rotate it here. And this gauge here reads different Newton meters. So it's the lower the Newton meters is the lower the force. So I put that on its lowest setting. Can you see? As you turn it, it makes a click noise when you reach the amount of stiffness that it should be at. So I like to put most of my components up to about probably, and then people say that they should be more like 14 Newton meters, but I like to do them to about 10 because you always slightly over tighten. Having a torque wrench stops you stripping the threads. Now, even with a relatively inexpensive bike like mine, you're screwing typically steel screws into an aluminium base, and if you tighten them too tightly, even once, they'll lose all their effectiveness, and that part of the bike is ruined. So definitely have torque wrench. This particular torque wrench set, how this was £12, I don't know, but it's lovely, and it's even got the different Allen keys that you need and a star drive in there, so that's nice. This is a slightly larger torque wrench. Actually, you don't need this. This is just from years ago. I used to do car maintenance. If you want to tighten up the cassette, they say that you should tighten that up to 40 Newton meters. But honestly, you don't need a torque wrench to work that out. If you weigh 80 kilos as I do, and your spanner is half a meter long, then you're giving 40 kilos of torque when you put your weight on the end of that spanner. So, you know, just use a bit of common sense. But a torque wrench for these lighter settings is absolutely essential. This is a pair of proper wire cutters. Don't buy ones like these little tin snips. They will not cut your... If you want to change the length of a brake cable, all they'll do is fray it. They won't actually cut it. Get some proper... These were only £3 from B&Q. I can't believe that as well. Got JCB written on them. Anyway, not expensive, these ones, but they will cut through that very easily. And they've got the serrations on here have got little tiny teeth on them, so that when you take a piece of metal to cut, it doesn't just slide along, it grabs it and cuts it. A blowtorch, you can buy these. I bought this one online. This was £6, and it came with some spare gas canisters. This is actually very useful. The other thing I'd say is, if you, like me, need to wear glasses, I need to wear just reading glasses to do the odd jobs on the bike. I've also bought a pair, and I use a 1.5 plus 1.5 diopter. I've bought a pair of plus 3.5 diopters for doing fine work. If you're working on the hubs or on one of the cone bearings, it's really nice to be able to see clearly, so I've got some extra strong glasses there. This is grease gum. Again, these are just a couple of pounds, and you just buy the grease and it just screws onto there, and then as you push that, you get, can you see a little file of grease comes out? It's very good because you can hold it against a bearing, and if you want to, for example, the pedal bearings, if you want to re-grease those, rather than taking them off, cleaning them out, re-greasing them, you can actually just push this right into the gap and squeeze out the old grease and put in new grease. It means you can re-grease your pedals in no time at all. Most bikes will also have very small brass screws, and if you use an ordinary household screwdriver like this, you will find you pretty quickly, because they're brass, the things that you screw into will pretty quickly tear, and it's the devil's own job getting those screws out once the tops of the screws have been ruined. So I don't know if the camera will show, this particular screwdriver it's tough and steel, and it's very sharp, so that it's not likely to slip out once you start turning. When we do the brakes, you'll see the brake pads are held in by a brass screw that's got a very, very soft top. So you need a tight screwdriver. We spoke earlier about removing the bottom bracket. This bottom bracket removal tool, you absolutely have to buy one of these. You cannot possibly use... I've got here a couple of mole spanners. You can't possibly use these. Don't use them, because all you'll do is ruin, you'll just scratch the area around that and it won't get it off. buy one of these. They're not expensive. This is a park tool, so this is quite a posh one. But this was only a few pounds. I think it was about £5 or £6. And it has on the back this little plastic wheel. I didn't know about this, and I bought one separately. And that took me ages to find. On the pedals, you'll see there's a plastic insert that holds the pedal in place on the far side, on the non-driving side. This tightens up the plastic thread, and it's amazing. That little plastic thread holds the whole thing together. Without this, you're not in business. I've added to my essential tool kit 2 mole spanners, and it's because if you're doing some of the jobs, like for example getting the bearings out, it's really nice to have some way of holding things in place. And mole spanners, if you adjust them with this screw at the back, they will just attach onto something. If I tighten it up a bit, and you need a pair of them, because if you want to hold something in place, you need to hold it on both sides. So what you do is you get it like that and click it, and that's now held, and they're very useful. So I've put them on my essential list of tools. They're not very expensive. You can buy these from any hardware shop. This little pair of pliers, these £11, these were quite dear for what they are. There's 2 different types of chain attachments. When I get to the chain video, I'll show you. These chains links just fit together, and you then force, using the chain link removal tool, a little piece of metal into the gap, and it holds it together. Other chains have a special link, and what you do is you pull the link together and it pops out, so you can then either replace the chain or do whatever you're doing. Then when you put it back again, you need to compress it, and it's really stiff. What this does is when you pull that side, it pulls together, or it pushes those 2 apart. So if you want to pull the chain apart, you insert those 2, squeeze it, and the whole chain comes apart. But as I say, we'll do a video showing that. This little thing here is probably the first thing you should buy. This is called a chain wear tool. There's probably a technical name for it, but it's a chain wear tool. So if you take a chain, how do you know when to replace the chain? Do you wait for the chain to break? And the answer is no, you don't, because it'll always break when you're in the middle of a long journey and you're miles from anywhere. Without the chain, you are going nowhere. So, if I take a chain, how do I know whether this chain is a brand new chain or, as it is, a worn out one? And on this little piece of, it's just a piece of stamped metal. This was I think about £2 as an add-on item on Amazon, and it's got little 0.75 and then 1.0 there. So what that means is when it's 0.75 times worn, I think it's 0.75 millimeters of play, but when it's 0.75, you need to change the chain straight away. When it's 1.0 times worn, the chain is completely worn and will have already destroyed your cassette and chainring. If you leave it as long as 1.0 worn, you'll probably need to replace the chainring, or possibly both chainrings and the cassette. The cassette will cost you about £50, £45 maybe. The chainring here, the outer chainring, this was also I think £45. So between them, that's £90. This chain, even a nice Shimano 5800 HG chain like this one, this is only going to cost you about £18, and one of these will last about 3,000 or 4,000 miles. Now, if I put this on the 0.75 times, it will, can you see, if you push it hard, actually that part of the chain isn't worn, can you see it goes through? That, if that bar goes through, it means the chain's worn. I'll show this in more detail when I do the chain video. That is looking terrible, isn't it? Let me just pull that out. So that part of the chain wasn't very worn, but on the other part of the chain, that'll just go through. Yeah, you see that goes through quite easily, so that shows that it's worn. If I try it on the other side, there's no way it's going to go through because it's not yet worn as far as 1.0 times. I find that for every, see on that side, look, there's just no way that's going through. I have to replace the chain probably 3 or even 4 times before I have to change the cassette or the chain wheel. I'd don't know why I keep the old chains, but I always have. I've got a massive stack of them. Now, we spoke about earlier about tyres. I always keep a spare new tyre. I don't know if the camera can see that one here. Because puncture repair kits are great, and I have one in my rucksack whenever I go anywhere, because if you have a puncture you need to be able to fix it. There are some lovely instant repair patches that I'll show you when we do the puncture repair video. But I was going to say, for your tools at home, especially if you've got a road bike, these types of tyre levers are they're just not man enough. You need to get some, and I'll show you in the later video, I don't think I've put them out here, some proper tyre levers. You need to get Allen keys. This particular set of Allen keys up to 1 centimetre came as part of this tool. To remove the free hub, there's a free hub there that the cassette sits on. This goes into there. But to remove the free hub, on this particular one, you need an 11mm. Where's it gone? Yeah, you need an 11mm Allen key to go in there, or a 12mm on this side. So you need some big Allen keys. They are a pain to get, actually. So when you're buying your tools, try and get a set that gets Allen keys, including an 11mm and a 12mm. Okay, this is degreaser. Now, when we do the video showing you how to care for your chain, we'll talk about degreasing the chain. This is actually, I've had it for ages and I never use it. I wouldn't bother with degreaser. I've found it is just not useful. It's nice to have. This is actually disc brake cleaner, but it doesn't do disc brakes, doesn't seem to help them at all, so I wouldn't waste your money with that. WD-40, we'll do a section on WD-40. Lots of people will say, don't use this, it's Satan incarnate. It's absolutely brilliant in my opinion, as long as you know what it is. WD in WD-40 stands for water displacement. It displaces, when you squirt it onto something, it displaces water, and indeed it'll displace grease as well. And it evaporates. So if you put this on a chain, it's terrible, because you think you're oiling a chain because it's got oil in it. You're not at all. What you're doing is you're cleaning the chain. It'll loosen grit and grime and grease, and it'll drip off with the grease and grime. But the chain will then just be left metal on metal, and as the oil, which is very light oil in WD-40, evaporates, you'll be left just wearing your chain out. You can wear a chain out in one ride. Really look after the chain, because they'll last and last and last if you look after them. WD-40 is great for cleaning, and when we come to the chain cleaning bit, I'll show you what I mean. This is chain oil. Now we'll do it, as I say, we'll do a section on this. Chain oil is absolutely lovely stuff, and I've used this Teflon based oil, which is lovely. You can get wet lubrication or dry lubrication. I like wet lubrication because even using WD-40 you still get bits of grease and grime in there. Wet lubrication just cleans everything through. This will not evaporate, it leaves a nice greasy residue to help smooth the chain. So I can oil the chain after I've cleaned it. I can oil the chain and then use a rag to wipe off the surplus wet lubricant. That's marvellous stuff. This is a chain cleaning tool. Don't waste your money on this. You can see I've not used it a great deal because it's so much aggravation to set it up. It's just not worth it. I mean, it's got a little magnet at the bottom that takes little shards of metal that you've cleaned, and this is a park tool. It's a posh tool, but honestly I wouldn't bother with one of those. If you want to clean the chain, I'll show a video on how to clean the chain. It shouldn't, if it takes more than about 5 minutes, you're doing something wrong. What else do I need to show? We're drawing to the end of this video. I've covered, oh yes, spare parts. I always keep a chain and a cassette and a set of cables, because and a tyre. All of these parts are consumable. You might not think they are, but they are. The chain, as I say, even if I oil my chain at least every week. I don't know, there are some people that say they oil it every ride, but I oil my chain and clean the chain at least every week. Sometimes I clean it twice a week, but even so, the chain, I don't know how much of that, the camera just stopped recording. I was just mentioning, I always keep a spare chain. This one is, and this is the right, I don't know why you have to have an 11-speed chain or a 12-speed chain or a 9-speed chain. I tend to always buy the right number of speed for my bike, because it does seem to make a difference. It's probably just psychological, but it does seem to glide more easily across the cogs. My spare bike has got 9-speed Shimano Sora. This one has 11-bit speed Shimano 105, and if I put a Sora chain on the bike, it just doesn't seem to change as nicely, which is a shame, because the Sora chains cost about, I don't know, £11 or £12, whereas these are £18 or £20. So spare chain and a spare cassette. As I say, the cassette lasts a lot longer, but once it goes, it's a real nuisance, because it's always that 11-speed cog that goes, and you can't buy them separately. I've tried looking around to buy them, and you just can't. When you look at a worn 11-speed cog, and when I show you the video, I will show this worn one here next to that. It's amazing how much metal gets taken off. But a worn out cassette has had a lot less wear than a worn out chainring. The last thing I'm going to show is a bicycle pump. Now this one has got it's got the gauge high up, and I definitely recommend that, because if, like me, you need reading glasses, you don't want to reach for your glasses when you're just topping up the air in the tyres. These stirrup pumps, if the camera can see that, these stirrup pumps are completely better than the hand pumps, because you can get much higher pressure. And running your tyres at low pressure is a fool's game. Not only will they wear out more quickly and get more punctures, but you're pedalling twice as hard as you need to pedal. Okay, so that's the end of the showing of the tools. So just to wrap up, I'll put that back there. Just to wrap up, definitely get yourself a bike stand. Buy all the tools beforehand, and once you've got them, they just sit in the garage. They're not expensive, but they're really handy to have. And that's it. That's the end of this video. Thank you for watching. Please do put some comments on, and if there's any particular jobs you want me to show you being done, I'll try and do those. Okay, thank you very much for watching the video.